There's something that we all call Youngstown grit when we get in our circles with each other, and we all know what that means and what that entails. Some of the streets that you just mentioned and the area that you originate from, how does that sentiment and that phrase relate to you and your time growing up in Youngstown as you're developing as a young man?
I guess you don't know it when it's happening. But, no one that grew up in the city of Youngstown had money. So you didn't know that as a kid. But, it just, I think it created the toughness inside of probably all of us that, that are from Youngstown. Playing street football and bouncing around and having your own little mini tournaments and, battling on a basketball court against some of the best. And a lot of the older guys, I think I got taught at a very young age in my neighborhood that, if you want to play, you got to be tough. And it was always tackle football, no matter what age we were, and you were always playing against the older kids. So I think it just created toughness and attitude about yourself, growing up on the north side. As I went through Ursuline, it was just one of those things that I wasn't a talker back then, and most people growing up see I'm a coach now, they laugh because I didn't talk much. I wasn't a vocal leader going through high school. So for me, it was just, always do the right thing, work as hard as you possibly can, and let the other kids, see you do that, and really be a good human being, be coachable, do those types of things, and just let the younger kids see you. That's kind of what I tried to do, instead of being.
We're back with one more down. Today we have head coach of Akron Hoban, Tim Tyrrell, Youngstown native, Ursuline graduate, 1993. I remember Coach Tyrrell as a outstanding quarterback for the Irish during our time in high school. And it's a great feeling for me to get a chance to have a conversation with you after so many years. Very proud of what you've accomplished and the things that you've done over the course of your career, not only as a player, but as a coach. And, the way that you represent our area is just outstanding. So I'm appreciative to have you on tonight and get a chance to get into some of the inner workings of who you are as a person. And, just thankful that you agreed to do this with us tonight. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, Tim, it's funny because we've got to talk over the years when I was coaching and just kind of watching you from afar, but also as far back as I was a freshman when you were a senior, and it's funny, you tell kids now and about how they set the standard, athletics culture wise, right? Just the standard that you set. People that you don't know are watching you, and I just remember walking the halls and seeing not only you as a senior, but just that whole crew of great players. And as a young kid, looking at the standard that was set, and particularly that year, the huge success you guys had football wise, in that season, it really set the standard of what the expectations were, also what could be achieved, right? Because I'm sure you battle it as a coach, maybe not at this point where you're at, but what do kids believe they can achieve? And when you see somebody do it that you rub shoulders with in the hall, seniors don't even know who freshmen are, but people are watching, and they're taking that leadership. So it's cool from that standpoint to come almost 30 years later to just be able to talk to you as two mature guys, and just kind of get to know you a little bit on that standpoint. So and obviously even thank you for setting that standard and being the good leader that set the expectations for the rest of us coming behind you at Ursuline. So.
Oh no, yeah. Hopefully, I didn't do anything really wrong to you when I was a senior.
Generally how we start these conversations, we like to get a feel of who the person is and the area of Youngstown that they originate from. So if you would like to begin the conversation with letting us know who you are, who your parents were, and give us some insight into growing up on that north side of Youngstown.
Yeah, I'm a proud north sider. I know there's not that much left of it nowadays, or at least where I grew up. You grew up on the north side, born on Saranac, lived some years on Saranac, right off of Elm Street. And then, as my family jokes about, we got a little richer and moved 5 streets down, closer to Ray, and grew up on Brookline for the rest of my time in Youngstown. My parents, Red and Rosemary Tyrrell, who are no longer with us, but they were original North Siders themselves. So never left. It's just we were a full Youngstown family. My dad's father was the fire chief, old number 7, right down by Ursuline. He was the fire chief down there. So that was my grandpa. And my other grandpa, David O'Neill, was the county commissioner. So that was my mom's side, the O'Neills and the Tyrrells. So there's 5 kids in my family. Oldest one is Bobby, and Sean, then myself as a middle child, Maureen, and Patrick, who's the goofball of all of us. All went to Ursuline and grew up on the north side, St. Ed's kids. right next to Rayan High School, and played street football and street basketball my whole life, um, from Crandall Park down to the YMCA, and just played the old way of athletics, which is just outside. We had football tournaments down on the bottom of Stanbaugh Golf Course, and tried to stay out of trouble as much as we possibly could. But it was a lot of fun. I still got a lot of people that I'm close with from the north side. So there's been some really good ones out of the north side of Youngstown.
You know, there's something that we all call Youngstown grit when we get in our circles with each other, and we all know what that means and what that entails. Some of the streets that you just mentioned and the area that you originate from, how does that sentiment and that phrase relate to you and your time growing up in Youngstown as you're developing as a young man?
I guess you don't know it when it's happening. But no one that grew up in the city of Youngstown had money. So you didn't know that as a kid. But it just, I think it created the toughness inside of probably all of us that are from Youngstown. Playing street football and bouncing around and having your own little mini tournaments and battling on a basketball court against some of the best. And a lot of the older guys, I think I got taught at a very young age in my neighborhood that if you want to play, you got to be tough, and it was always tackle football, no matter what age we were, and you were always playing against the older kids. So I think it just created toughness and attitude about yourself, growing up on the north side, that you never back down to anybody. There was unfortunately a lot of fights growing up, but it was done the right way. Sometimes you get beat up, sometimes you won some, but you always ended up boys afterwards. It usually surrounded not as much football as much basketball. There was a lot of fights in basketball on Crandall Park. So it was a lot of fun though, growing up, and then the natural ability to just go over to Ursuline. My choices were Ursuline and Rayan. A couple of my boys went to Rayan, and I kind of thought about it, but Coach Angle over at Ursuline, him and John DeGidio, weren't really having it, and I played at Northeast Catholic for Frank Naples, who was, loved him to death. Him and his staff they made us tough. They did some things that if I did, I'd get fired as a coach. But I think it just created so much toughness inside of us, and like you say, that grit. So it was a lot of fun though, and I got lifelong friends because the majority of us all went to Ursuline from Northeast Catholic, and we still keep in touch. Probably not as much as we should, but I still see some of them. Some of them are college coaches themselves, and I get to see them went through the recruiting trail.
Hey, Tim, talk about the Catholic School League. When obviously I was a few years behind you in terms of that, but I played at Northeast Catholic also, and I think it was St. Pat's of Hubbard, St. Ed's, St. Anthony's, Immaculate, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think if we missed any, but that league was a really good league, playing up at Rayan Stadium. On the Saturdays, I believe it was.
Sundays. We did Sundays.
Sundays. Okay. It might have been that. There's like 3
Sundays
or 4 games going on. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. What was that kind of like in terms of, it's really a unique thing where each individual school didn't necessarily have enough guys to be a team, but you have 4 or 5 different schools coming together and, not having that interaction during the day, but then coming to practice and trying to see who the pecking order is in terms of who the players are and where you fit in. And St. Rose and Gerard, we had St. Rose too. So maybe touch on that a little bit.
We didn't have St. Rose. I still remember St. Rose, that they were one of the bigger schools. They had their own team. I could tell you I still remember some of those guys from St. Rose because they were really good. They ended up having good careers at Girard. Um, but yeah, it was really cool. I was blessed. So I was at St. Ed's. My two older brothers were the last classes that actually had a team at St. Ed's. It wasn't Northeast Catholic yet. So I was the water boy, and got to watch my brothers play football for St. Ed's. And then when I came up to seventh grade, they started Northeast Catholic. I think I was the first class of Northeast Catholic. So it was kind of cool. All those guys, we used to practice over at St. Anthony's um, every single day. And you learned a lot about football when you look back upon things. Those coaches were really good on the fundamentals. Um, I learned, the most important parts of football. I remember Coach Naples used to yell, "If you can tackle and block, you're going to be good in football." And I still say those things today. It's still a game of tackling and blocking. Um, but it was fun because you got to play all over, and during that time, there was a ton of talent, in that Catholic school league. Um, I still remember Tom Palucci, who I played college football with. St. Mary's won it, out from Warren. So, we lost to them in the state in the championship. We were all sad and beat up about it. But I just loved playing at Rand. That was the other cool thing because I spent so much time of my own life. Uh, you know, they had the cut in the fence. I never paid. Me and my boys used to just slide through the cut in the fence. And I watched honestly more Rand games growing up than I did Ursuline, just because it was, right up the street. And I used to just walk in and watch all those games and watch all the talent from Rand back in the day. Um, so it was cool. Like you get to play on that field. Rand was something special when you were in seventh and eighth grade. It was a high school field and lined, and it wasn't all dirt, and they took care of it, and it was just a ton of fun. And those kids are the ones that the seventh and eighth. When we were in seventh and eighth grade, I got to play with the majority of those kids all through high school with football and basketball. And like I said, I'm still friends with some of those guys. I still talk to the Art Carters and Jimmy Campana, even though he was Struther's boy. I got to play with him in high school. But Brian Flynn, I was just with Brian last week. Those guys have been part of my life, forever since the late '80s. So it was cool to play in that league.
And then, talk about, the transition to Ursuline in terms of, was there obviously, your brothers went and there was a family lineage to go take that path. Um, what what were kind of your expectations walking through the doors? Obviously playing for Coach Angle, and you mentioned Coach Gidio and the great coaching staff they had and the expectations. What were your thoughts going in? Did you have any specific goals? You end up being the guy at quarterback and being the leader. Were you thinking about that stuff when you went in, or what
Well,
was?
yeah, I was funny because me going into high school, my two older brothers played sports in middle school, grade school, and middle school. My brother, just older than me, Sean, he wrestled in high school. None of the other ones didn't do anything that I did. So my oldest one was a bit of a misfit, as we joke around to the day. He's very, very successful right now um, as a businessman, but we used to call him the misfit, even though he's the oldest brother. I was try to not be them because they always used to get in trouble. So I had to walk in being straight laced, and they were like, "Okay, this Tyrrell is going to make it." So, um, but I also walked in football wise and basketball. It was I was a fullback linebacker, coming into it. So in my freshman year, I played outside linebacker in fullback. In my sophomore year, I was a fullback and outside linebacker, and I thought I was the next big time defensive player. Really, Ayrton was gonna have. Uh, and then Dick Angle and John DeGidio just met with me. I was probably better at basketball than football to start, so I was JV as a freshman with basketball, and then started and was a leading scorer as a sophomore, with basketball. Um, PJ McCarthy was kind of the man back in the day as a senior. Um, but I was kind of the up and coming kid, and they just met with me after a basketball game and just said, "Hey, listen, we didn't know you were that athletic. You want to play quarterback?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. However you're going to get me on the field, I don't care." Um, and I was number 33, so they just said, "You want?" I was like, "Do I get to switch numbers?" Because I already had my Letterman's jacket. I felt cool, with my Letterman's jacket as a sophomore. So, uh, they were like, "Yeah, yeah, you could change your number," and they gave me a list to pick from, and 6 seemed like the coolest at the time. So, single digit. And Diallo Anderson had it the year before, who was like a living legend at Ursuline at the time. So I was like, yeah, I'll take Diallo's number. So uh, it was just fun, kind of transitioning from being the grunt, blocking every play for Trevor Stargell and John Fields and all those tailbacks. Um, and wrong arming people and doing those types of things on defense, uh, to actually calling some plays. But you saw some of the highlights. I wasn't running out of bounds. I still had the fullback mentality, and my receivers hated me. Um, we only threw 53 times my whole senior year. So, and I think we went back over 100, but I only threw it 53. So they really didn't like me.
As you touch on some of those themes in your rise and your development, there's a couple things that stand out. And, I'm sure it's based on the eras that we grew up in and just the dynamics of Youngstown at the time. But you tend to develop strong bonds and relationships with people from that time period and in that era. And then you also get inspired by the generation of players that are ahead of you. You touch on one of the great names, Diallo Anderson. And, I'm sure watching those Rand squads, seeing the Colonel,
Oh yeah.
Pat Humphrey, Derek Lewis, and all those guys, when you think about you finally getting the reins and being able to be under those lights on a Friday night or a Saturday evening up at YSU, you're right down the street from your house and your neighborhood. Who are those characters that kind of pop out for you and inspiring you to be a better player in your own right? And then, what is your singular mentality and your singular approach to leading your crew of guys at Ursuline?
I think the person I tried to, even though we were completely two different athletes, but Clinton Lynch, who just he would make us feel even more older. His son just graduated. He's over at Princeton. Brian Flynn recruited him to go to Princeton, but Clinton Lynch lived in the same neighborhood, right on bottom of my street. So I got to watch him. How talented he was. He was one of the better tailbacks in Ursuline history. So, and he taught me how to box. So, he used to just put us. It was kind of mean at the time, but we had the boxing gloves on, and he put us in front of a tree, and his role was he was real fast. If you didn't want to get hit, you had to move, but if you got hit, you're going to hit in the face, and the back of your head was going to hit the tree. So you learn how to become quick. That was his way of teaching us how to be quick. So being able to watch him and Locke Beecham and Mark, Wolford, and all those guys when I was coming into, and then being able to play. I got to be able to play with Diallo, not with as much with football as much as was basketball. We were on the same court a lot. And him and I became pretty close as athletes at a young age. Kevin Ellerby and those guys, that was a unique group of guys that I got to follow. And having an older brother, two older brothers, and all their age. Mike Eccles, I mean, I grew up, Mike Eccles used to beat me on a daily basis because he was best friends with my brother Sean. So they used to be always over my house. And my mom was a teacher at Immaculate, and a lot of the kids at Ursuline, especially the athletes, came from Immaculate. So I knew those guys, and they knew my mom, and they'd come over to the house, even before I got to Ursuline. So as I went through Ursuline, um, it was just one of those things that I wasn't a talker back then, and most people like growing up see I'm a coach now, they laugh because I didn't talk much. I wasn't a vocal leader. Um, Going through high school. Uh, so for me, it was just, always do the right thing, work as hard as you possibly can, and let the other kids, you know, see you do that, and really be a good human being, uh, be coachable, do those types of things, and just let the younger kids see you. That's kind of what I tried to do, instead of being, I don't know, those talkers when I was in high school used to just drive me crazy. They used to just talk, 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 and I used to be like, man, all you do is talk. Can we do something? Like, let's get to work. Um, and that's probably because I grew up with a lot of older kids, and I wasn't allowed to talk. You weren't talking smack, or the fights happened. So, uh, you learn your way, and then that was the biggest thing at Ursuline for me was just teach the kids as a coach. That's when I really started liking the idea with the coaching side of things is learning. Mitch Cerny, my basketball coach, was the greatest with that. Um, he won a state championship the year after I left. We should have won one my senior year, but uh, he taught me film study. He taught me how to coach the younger kids because we had Brad Miller and Jason McCray, and some of those guys were young bucks, and he put a lot on me as a senior to be able to coach them on the floor and do those types of things. So it was kind of my first beginning of coaching. And then when you left, it was kind of cool being at Youngstown State because then I could go back. I remember watching Dallas and Frascos and all those guys, Jared Santagata, and like I knew those guys, so it was kind of cool. When we had home games, I could talk smack to all the Youngstown State teammates of mine, and let's walk out, after team meal and film and go watch Ursuline play. And I used to tell you all the Florida boys, let's go watch real football. Let's go outside and watch real football. So it was a lot of fun, but it kind of started me on my path, with what I do now.
Us being in the same graduation year, um, obviously we don't get to really watch each other's teams play week to week, but I was always aware of what was happening around the city and in the SVC. We had common opponents amongst ourselves. And, when I look at the difference from your junior year in 91 to what you guys were able to accomplish in 92, there's an emergence from you guys group. What was behind that rise, and what fueled you guys through your senior year to have the type of season that you guys did?
Well, number one, I think the whole city was loaded in the 92 season, 93 class. You look at your guys' group over at Cheney. I still talk anytime I see him. I still talk smack to Rick Havrilla. We were more rivals when it came to basketball, but the South boys with basketball. Mooney had a great team that year. Fitch was awesome. They went to the state semifinals with the English boys and Nick Siciliano, Bobby Moore. All those guys from the All-Star game. Camrad. I think the '93 class just had a lot of talent. So I think it was just a natural thing for us when we became seniors. A lot of us started and played a lot as sophomore and juniors. The class just ahead of me with Art Carter and Adam Veazey and Frank Zober, there was a couple guys. It wasn't a huge class. So the majority of our team in 91 was juniors. So we just all came back with a little different attitude, a little bit more mature, understanding the weight room a little bit more with Roland Smith, kind of pushing that really heavy. Before the time of you have to be, bigger, faster, and stronger. He really pushed the weight room for us. Um, and we had some talent. Jason Williams was, he was stronger than some of the kids I was playing with in college, and it was a really good class, I think, in the whole city. But for Ursuline, I think it was just the fact that we had so much returning and so much experience that, um, we were going to be good, and we were not going to let, our families and fans down. It was something we really wanted. And unfortunately, Lake Catholic, it's scary because I know most of the guys that a lot of them are coaches, um, that are from Lake Catholic, and I'm friends with some of them now. But it was basically the state championship, in the when we played them in the playoffs.
Yeah, that was um, you know, I think you're right in terms of I never put it in that context about the 92 season and just all the talent that was going through there. But that's Ron's, which you talked about with the Cheney team, that first playoff win, you guys making just an epic run, and having a heartbreaker to Menor Lake. Um, and I think the other thing is, when you look at, I don't know, that SVC, at that time was I mean, it was just multiple wars. There wasn't a down team in it, from Harding to Mooney to um, Boardman, and to go through that gauntlet. And as a coach now, right? Um, you can go to war 3, 4, 5 times, but even in your situation, you're going to war 10 games probably now.
Yeah,
Um, and back then, you were going to war against Murderers Row, 7, 8 weeks, and just the gauntlet that the Steel Valley was at that time, and the talent in there, and then be healthy enough, playing well enough to make that run at the end of the season. Just really, really an impressive performance.
yeah, it
And
was it was it was hard.
yeah, and then go get ready for basketball. How much time did you have off from the end of the season there to go play basketball, right?
Well, yeah, none really. You get just Coach Cerny used to yell at me because I used to think I was in shape, and he used to just be in my ear because they would start early, and we'd still in the playoffs, and he'd come over to a football game and see me, and he'd say, "You look fat. You're looking fat. You look like you're in football shape, not basketball shape." And he wasn't lying. I
Yeah.
thought I was in shape every year, and I'd come in, and basketball shape and football shape are two separate things, especially on Ursuline's floor. So that ain't easy to play on. So it was hard. Then you didn't really stop until end of February, beginning of March. And I wasn't doing anything in the spring. Mr. Stroya always wanted me to run track, do all that kind of stuff. I was like, no, I need a break. My body got beat up. Um, we did a lot of quarterback runs, so I took some abuse.
Two things I wanted to touch on. The first one, kind of thinking back, I think a testament to a leader is, when they leave, it's left better than, and not implying that it wasn't good, but right when you leave, it's left better than when you got it. So the following, you guys win 10 games your senior year. The following year, 10 games. That next year is a down year, which was 5-5, which seemed like an abject failure. But then get back to the playoffs and so on. So I think it's a real testament that, and to your point of, you were senior laden, but you still had guys step in that were ready to go and be very successful. Um, how do you feel about that? And it's interesting to ask you because you're a coach now, right? And you
Yeah.
live and breathe this, and you're trying to do it. How do you feel about that legacy, leaving behind that hey, we were great, but we also left the environment where other people can be as successful as we were?
Yeah, I think the other unique thing that we were as seniors is we were very close with the younger kids. So it wasn't like, say, seniors did this and everyone else, like I still remember when I was a sophomore, You got to carry pads. You walk from Ursuline over to YSU for home games, and you were carrying a senior's pads. Um, we made a pact. We didn't do that. When I was a senior, we didn't do that to the sophomores. It was just something that we decided we weren't going to do. Number one, we didn't like it, and we had some good leaders that were really good as sophomores. So, it just didn't sit natural with us. So we took a different turn on that, and we were a little bit closer with the younger guys. Um, Trevor Stars and Vinnie Burton and Shad Chambers and all those dudes, all the way down through the sophomores, with Mike Frasco and all those guys, we were pretty close as a group, and a lot of us just grew up together in the same neighborhood. So it was a natural thing that we weren't going to pull the I'm a senior and you're a sophomore and junior and you're going to do what I say. We just didn't do it. So I think it helped a lot. So when those guys became seniors, um, they probably did it the same way we did, and were able to kind of like more continue that side of things. Um, and it helped at practice. There was no bitterness. One young kid saying I should be better than the older kid, that type of stuff. Um, and we were more of a family, and I think that's what stung the most when we lost. Um, is it was a close knit group, and we still joke to the day. I don't come in town as much as I probably should or I can just because of my job. Um, but all those guys still get together, once or twice a year, and I end up on FaceTime, and Mike Narducci lives out in California, and he's FaceTiming and yelling at me why aren't I there and all that type of stuff, and so it was a uniquely close group, all the way through.
As you make that transition out of Ursuline, you choose to, go a few blocks down over to Youngstown State University. And, when you, from the outside looking in at that, their transition from the days when you could just walk into Stambaugh Stadium, sit anywhere that you want. I think we were around 12, 13 when Coach Tressel first took over the reins there. And I used to go to games off of the ticket that you would get on the Schwabel's bag for the
Yeah.
discount.
Yeah, I
Sit right
remember
on
that.
the
Yeah.
50-yard line and, beg guys to throw balls up into the stands.
Oh yeah.
But, as we are in the beginning part of our high school experience, they're turning the corner. 90, they have a fantastic season. And then, when they brought home that title, we took a trip downtown. Coach Burtis took us down there to witness it and just see what was going on. And you recognize familiar faces from the area that were the backbone of that team. What is that like for you to know that you're going down the street? You're going to be in a familiar place that you've played a lot of great football in, but still having to figure out and find out, the version of Tim Tyrrell that's going to be wearing red and black instead of gold and green.
Yeah, that was hard. I'm not gonna lie. The transition from high school to college for me was a little different. I wasn't gonna play football. I probably had a lot more success. I was a good football player in high school, and I was I played a really good role in my mind as a coach. Now I look back, at the time I thought I was the greatest thing since sliced bread, as a football player. Um, I consider myself now. I look back. I always tell my son and everybody else, I'm like, I wasn't as good as I thought back then. Um, I thought I was a very good role player. The basketball, I was a little bit better. So I was going to go play college basketball. And I was going to St. Joe's out in Indiana. Um, and that's what I decided right after basketball season, and got recruited and got a scholarship and was going. The basketball coach at St. Joe's, um, right before I signed, took the head coaching job at Youngstown State. So he immediately called me and said, "Don't sign, don't come to St. Joe's. I just took the Youngstown job. Come play for me at Youngstown." So I was like, "All right, I'll do that. It's right down the street." So, and then Tress and Mark Snyder, the local recruiting coach for Tress, uh, still were recruiting me on the side. And Tress walked in one day to Ursuline and said, "Hey, what are you going to do now that we hired him over at Youngstown?" And I just asked, I said, "Can I do both?" And he said, "Yeah, you come play both." And it was funny because, being a quarterback, I thought I was going to be a quarterback in college. Just as I found out I wasn't as good as I thought I was. Uh, we got to camp, and I spent 24 hours at quarterback. Second day of practice, he walked over to me and said, "Hey, do you want to play or do you want to just watch?" And I said, "Coach, I just want to play." And he goes, "Okay. Uh, when you're going into meeting rooms, go to the tight end room, not the quarterback room." And I'm like, "All right." So I knew I was going to get redshirted, and unfortunately, I got a bad knee injury my freshman year, which kept me out of basketball. Um, and tearing it to almost everything in my knee. So that took a while to rehab. And then I came back, missed my whole redshirt freshman year of football. So I came back as a redshirt sophomore. Um, and I had I started to look like a tight end, started to get bigger and stuff like that. I was 170 going into college, so I got receivers 10 times bigger than that now in high school. So uh, I immediately started playing a lot as a sophomore and got success as a tight end. In that third year of college, with the first two, one redshirt and the other one kind of rehabbing my whole life in '94. Um, but they were great because they still made you feel really part of it. Even though I was sitting on the sidelines a lot, the teammates and everything else like that, I still loved from the '94 class. Um, and so it was a tough transition because of an injury. Um, but and then I still tell Tress we're really close and talk all the time, and I still tell him I'm the greatest quarterback that never played quarterback at Youngstown State. Um, I was the emergency one my senior year, wearing number 88. But it was tough. It took me a lot longer in college to kind of know my role, um, than I did when I was in high school. Became more of a vocal leader. Started to get that more of a coach mentality as a college player. Um, Really took a while, but I fell in love with the scheme side of things. I love watching film. I was always the first one in and last one out. Ray Isaacs taught me that. I grew up with Ray. He's a lot older than I was. But Ray was a North Sider. That guy I watched at Ray in high school, and he lived close to me. And when I got to Youngstown, he just kept on me, kept on me. You gotta live in that room. You gotta live in that room and know what everybody's doing before they do it, and the game will be slower for you. And it took some time, but I really got that. And you know, as I got older, and that's what made me a better player in college than I was in high school. Is understanding the game a lot more. Um, and then that kind of got me to be a coach as I went through.
What would you have to say about destiny and fate, given that you had some of that early adversity? You land right down the street from your neighborhood, and then you're exposed to what we know now to be an all-time great football coach. What is it about that cocktail and that exposure to those high-level concepts, high-level competition, and just being tutored by a guy and in a system that demands success and demands attention to detail?
I think me and Tress talk about it a lot. Like he makes fun of me usually when we're talking publicly. Um, I was just always the underdog. Even coming out, I was the only white dude on the street team. I was only white guy on the basketball court. Playing at Crandall or at the YMCA, and I always had the mentality of proving myself. So, when no one thought I could. It was one of those situations. And Tress is that kind of coach that, he he's going to look at different things. He's not going to just look at your 40 time. He's not going to look at how tall you are, how big you are. You know, he's a big guy, and you saw it even had more talent at Ohio State, but you still saw the guys that were the best players at Ohio State during his time. They were heart guys. They were guys with grit. Those are the guys that, you know, love him like a father to the day. So I just learned that from him. That was a huge part of, what I learned from him is how to handle adversity. Because he knew I was going through it with the injuries and people kind of forgetting about you as you go. And he would just constantly challenge me. And he's the first one that said I was going to be a coach, at my senior year. And, I said, okay, let me coach. Right out of college, I wanted to coach. And he set some interviews up for me. And, being like the second dad he was for me, he said, no, you need to go get a real job. Go get a real job, and then you'll figure out if you're a coach. So I got hooked up with the sales job, selling windows. And 6 months into doing that, making good money, I just ended up walking back into his office and said, okay, it's been enough time. I'm coaching. So, and he hired me right away. And that's, he knew what I wanted to do. We didn't always agree. I wasn't one of the players that was afraid to talk to Coach Tress man to man and kind of go over different things, behind closed doors. But that's the type of coach he was. He loved that, and he loved being able to work with everybody, and that's why there's so many players that he's had that have a different type of relationship. They're all individualized because weirdly, that man, sends me a Christmas card and birthday gifts to my kids, every year, and he does that for thousands of people. It's uniquely weird that, he won't see my wife for 5 years and all of a sudden see her and start talking to her about like they saw each other the other day. So it was a true honor to be able to play for him and that to learn so much about how to treat people. And a term that like me and Teddy Ginn, the great Teddy Ginn, talk a lot about. And him and I were just talking today about it, and we both learned it from the same guy. Is you have to have emotional intelligence, and I think that's one of the biggest things I learned from Tress is how to treat people. I had two great parents that raised me that way, but in the professional world, in the coaching world, I learned, how to treat people the right way and how to treat players, teammates, all that type of stuff from him.
So, just we've hit on it, but I specifically want to ask this because, when I was growing up, I grew up on Florencedale, 4 blocks from YSU, and I used to go.
Mm-hmm.
Me and my dad would walk down to Bigley and watch basketball games and go to all the football games. And so I went to YSU to play baseball, but I don't know. For me, it was a situation similar to what you're saying. Like I would see all these guys that are larger than life, and hey, you're here. What was your experience? Real quick, the emotional side of it, like being able to play there, a mile from where you grew up, being able to coach there. There has to be an element of that emotional attachment that other people don't have just because of your proximity to the campus.
Yeah, it was. I get chills thinking about it. It was special, because at that point in Youngstown, that was the ticket. When I was playing, it was sold out every game.
Mm-hmm.
No matter who we were playing, that place was sold out. In my senior year, they built the other side because it just sold out so many times. And being a local kid, and the one that everybody knew, that it was like playing, at Alabama to me, or Ohio State, because when you did something, everybody would chant your name. Everybody knew me. So the whole city of Youngstown knew who I was, and that was something special. And then to be able to coach there, and teach other kids what I knew. Um, it was just a special thing to be able to walk through Youngstown. And the joke was, when I was going to school there, you remember the whole, you're from Youngstown if, and it would tell you all the different things. The last one, number 25, you're from Youngstown if you know Timmy Tyrrell. So like I used to joke about that. Like my roommates used to laugh about it. Um, it was special. It was like completely different, um, for me than probably the majority of the team. Just because I was a North Sider and I lived a mile. I grew up a mile from campus, and it was the local boy did well. So it was a lot of fun. My parents loved it. My dad was the most proud dude in the world. He'd be yelling and screaming in the stands. Um, so it was a lot of fun. And then it was even better, to be honest with you, when I started coaching, you saw a different side of things. I learned who Coach Tressel really was as a coach, and how much he cared for kids, even more than as a player. Um, and then you kind of started building that, learning how to build bonds with your own players. It kind of started me on my career once I started coaching.
Yeah, and so that kind of leads me to the next piece. Kind of hearing your story about, just the well-roundedness, um, the from experience to just socially, the amount of different people, cultures, socioeconomic backgrounds you were exposed to, navigating all that, the positions on the football field that you played, right? Being a linebacker, fullback, going to quarterback, going becoming a tight end. How did all of that prepare you for the successful coaching career that you have had and continue to have? How does that fit into the rest of the puzzle in preparation?
I think it really just started me being able to understand the game. When you learn it from so many different aspects, um, it got me to love the game. So that's what really got me to love it. Because it's hard. It's a hard sport. You guys know that. It's not easy at any level. Um, and you kind of want breaks, and you want those types of things, and because it's physically and mentally tough, probably more mentally than physically. But playing all those positions kind of helped me get a different aspect of the game. And then when I started coaching, I don't know if he did it later on, especially at Ohio State. I think it would have been tough. But with me, um, as a young coach and just playing, uh, I wasn't allowed to coach the position that I was named to coach until I had to take a test. So in college with Tressel, every week you had a test for the game plan of that week. And every single week, my whole first year of being a college coach, I used to have to pass the test of every single position.
Mm,
And I didn't know why
mm.
he was doing it to me. And he wasn't doing it to the other young coaches. I don't know why. I used to feel like pointed out, like I was like, damn, why is he making me do this? And I'd go into Coach Haycock, as defense coordinator, say, Coach Haycock, I need the DB test, D line test, and linebacker. And I'd go on the plane or wherever we're going, I'd take the test. And for every position, which is hard because you're trying to really study the tight end position. And I knew that one, that was easy. But then knowing everything else, and then the hardest test was always his as a quarterback, because there was so much involved in the quarterback test. Um, but then I started to enjoy it. And then I would ask, even though I didn't have to take the tests. Um, it, and I learned later in life why he was doing it. And I asked later, he goes, well, I always thought you were going to be a head coach. So to be a head coach in his eyes, you need to be able to coach everybody else. So, receivers coaches know receivers. So, the head coach got to be able to coach receivers, running backs, O-line, tight ends, DBs, everybody. So, when it's the heat of the battle, you got to be able to coach every position. And that's just how I was brought up in that coaching world, where now I I always have the question for my coaches when I hire them. I always ask the question. I said, "Do you want to be a position coach? Do you want to be a coordinator? Do you want to be a head coach one day?" And if they answer coordinator or or head coach one day, I treat them the same way. I make them learn everything before I ever let them call play. Like I've had coordinators on both sides of the ball that are listed as coordinators who don't call a play. They just listen to me on a headset and signal it in. Like I won't let them call a play until I know if my offensive coordinator knows the whole defense and knows how to coach every position on the defense, he then can call a play. My D coordinator, who's the head coach at McKinley right now, Renzi Parnell, he's doing a great job over at Camp McKinley. And his first 2 years with me, he was a D coordinator, but wasn't really calling the defense yet. And he learned he was a better O-line coach. He could tell you right now he's a better O-line coach and skill position coach on offense than he is defense because he learned it. He learned it all. And now he's a great head coach. In his first year, he's coaching coaches. So I just learned that from Tress, and I didn't know it at the time. I thought it was fun, to learn all those types of things. But as my wife tells me, it's hard to watch a football game with me that means something to me. I could just watch an NFL game to watch an NFL game. But if I'm watching YSU or if I'm watching Ohio State, it's not too much fun to watch a game with me because I'm constantly saying, like, I'm watching the guard, I'm watching the D tackle, like, oh my, I'm sitting there yelling at him, and like, can't just watch the ball like everybody else. I'm like, I can't. So like, it's tough. So it's I still remember when Ohio State beat Purdue on the 4th and 1 to go to the national championship. Everyone remembers the play. Hitting the receiver down the sideline. It was 4th and 1. And I remember watching Tress. I was watching the game live, and I still remember I was reading his mouth, and when he said the play, I go, he's hitting the tight end or he's going deep. He's running wide shallow. He's running wide shallow. And everybody I was with was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, he's running wide shallow. And boom, wide shallow, hit the ball, hit him deep. He had 2 looks, tight end or hitting the receiver down the side, and Krenzel threw it deep. He had the perfect read, and they won the game. And I'm sitting there going, I'm yelling the play, and they're going, "What are you talking about? He just threw it. He's crazy. He threw it 4th and 1." I said, it wasn't crazy. The first check was the tight end. He was covered, so he knew it was man, so he threw it deep. So it was just fun knowing those types of things and learning from. In my eyes, I've got a chance to study under some really good coaches because of probably my relationship with Tress. So, I've taken advantage of, but, when you talk about the best of the best in this era, Tress and Saban and some of those guys, Urban Meyer, even though he's a different personality than those guys, those guys are some true football coaches.
When someone who looks at what you've accomplished and the heights that you've been to, winning is fun, titles are great, but we all know we can't do these things without great staff. You can't do what you've done consistently for as long as you've done it without support at home and the understanding of your children, because a lot of time is taken away from them and things that you may miss out on. And then, you have those players that are in it for their own reasons. Some of them, as they age in your system, begin to grasp the finer points of what that success means and what comes with it. When you think about that, like what's the hardest part of being in your position and doing what you've done and accomplishing what you've accomplished that the average person or those that are on the outside of what you do don't understand about that process?
It's you have to have, number one, you gotta, if you're going to be married and you're going to have a family and you're going to be a successful coach, because there's 2 different types of coaches. There's coaches that coach for stipends and money and to get retirement, and they could tell you exactly how many years they have left before they retire. Or there's the guys that it's a lifestyle. It's their life. So that's me, and there's a lot of good coaches like that. They don't necessarily win state championships, but it's their life. It's not a hobby. It's not a hey a thing I'm going to do after school. It's their whole life. You better have a really good wife. You better have someone that understands that, because you may have kids. I have two wonderful kids, um, and they're they understand now, and hopefully they're into sports one day, and love it as much as I do, whatever that sport is. Um, but it's just an extended family. It's crazy. Every year you got a senior class that leaves. Um, and this is something I learned from Dick Angle, because like, you know, Dallas, like you could still sit with Dick Angle and he could talk about every little thing that you didn't even know he knew. Like,
Right.
and he now it's like more of a friend when you're
Hmm.
talking to him. And as a coach, every year when you're that type of coach, when it's a lifestyle for you, that you have so many kids. It's just so many of them, and they're so much a part of your life. You know, my 2014 class in my first state championship in 15, my son was born, and those guys are always back around when they can't get back into town and doing those things. My son's 11 now, and he doesn't even remember, but he got 1,000 pictures of on people's shoulders and taking pictures with championship, trophies, and those guys holding them up at age 1, and breaking it down when we're in Ohio State. It was it's a cool thing because every year you just keep gaining more and more kids. Um, and it's a unique thing because, you know, you have good days and bad days with your own kids, and then you have good days and bad days with your extended family. Um, and when you have a wife that understands that, and she understands that she's going to be a mom to a lot of these kids, you know, we've had kids sleeping on couches, that had bad home lives. And, she's waking them up, getting them ready for school from back when I was living in Florida all the way through Hoban. And, and kids that, you got to take care of, and kids that need to call you at 3 in the morning because something went wrong, and she understands it. And it's just a part of her life now too, that she's invested like I am. So if you don't have that wife that understands that, it's never going to work, because then you're pulled in one direction more than the other, and instead of your family becoming part of the family. So my daughter, a 9-year-old girl, and she's on the field. She's part of it. All the boys, after we win or lose, both my kids are in the huddle praying. You know, we're either smiling and praying, or we're all sad and praying. But they're both sitting there. They got their hand on someone's shoulder and saying the Our Father, and doing the fight song, all that stuff. So my wife's standing right behind. So there is no push and pull. It's just all one big family. Um, and then you have assistant coaches that buy into that. That's what Teddy and I were talking about. Coach Ginn this morning was, a lot of times nowadays, a lot of these young guys getting into coaching play way too much PlayStation, and they get into coaching to call plays, and not enough of them understand that you got to build the relationship first. It's about your position, kids trusting you. It's about having that emotional intelligence that those kids live and die on everything you say, not because you're a good coach, it's because you're a good man. And so how I hire a staff is I got about 6 guys, that's it, that are X's and O's guys. They can get up on the board with anybody. And then there's another 7 to 10 that are just great men. And those are some of the best coaches I've ever coached with. Um, they don't, I coach them. What I need them to know, I coach them. But the kids don't know that. They don't know I'm going over game plans on Sundays and doing everything, telling them exactly what I want them to do at practice. And then some of them know naturally because they were great players, or want to be head coaches one day themselves and coordinators. But the majority of staff has got to understand that they're an extension of that kid's dad. And that's what builds a team. That's what we had. when I was at Ursuline, when I played Frank Naples, I could tell you Coach Naples, Coach King, Coach Kearns, those are the guys from Northeast Catholic. And, I could name almost every single one of the Ursuline coaches. Coach Julie was calling the defense, and he messed with me more in practice than Angle and DeGidio and Toth and those guys were on offense. So, like, it was TC. I mean, there was so many of those guys that, I looked up to. They never coached me one practice. They never had anything to do with me. I was worrying about Angle punching me or DeGidio punching me for something I did wrong. But those guys were always have my back. So they were great men. I still have no idea if any of them were good coaches. I have no idea. I don't know if they could call a play. I didn't know who called plays. I didn't care. I know those were great guys. You know what I mean? And I look back and was blessed to be able to have great men around me, but I couldn't tell you. When I got to college, I knew who was a good coach on plays and stuff like that. But in high school, I mean, Dallas, can you remember who the hell was calling plays? I didn't know. I didn't care either. I just knew those guys were good guys.
Right. And you know what? It's funny you say that because I think it's so true. And this circles back to, kind of confirms the rest of like the thought that I had about how you left the state of, the athletic programs when you moved on. And what you're saying right now applies to every aspect of life, not just athletics, in terms of the emotional intelligence, being a good human, and whatever goal it is in athletics, business, professionally, personal relationships, it is that relationship. And it's so important. And your kids playing for you now and coaches under your care are going to realize that whether, they go on to bigger and better things athletically or not. And I think that's a huge legacy to leave when those kids do leave your care and become young men and pursue their dreams after. So if you could just identify a couple things, 1, 2, 3 things, you mentioned a lot of the coaches that you played for, the impact they had. What are some of those key things that you took? And I think it's probably going to be that relationship thing you just talked about, but what are a couple other things that you took from your time with those great men, that you've brought along with you, as you navigate playing the top talent in the country? What are some of those things that you've brought along?
So I've narrowed it down and I've kind of built it to what I from when they walk in as 8th graders to when they leave, the things I've kind of categorized it in 3 different ways. And I tell them the 3 most important things that I want them to learn leaving Hoban is, number 1, the player comes first. And, the player has to come first. Everybody is individualized. That's the thing I learned. That's that family. That's that, everybody's different. You got to coach a kid, as an individual. You got to listen to what position they want to play. It's not always about like, hey, remember the old, in quotations, you got to do it for the team. That ain't right. You don't do that to a kid because you got to get to know them. Like, what position you want to play, son? What do you want to do? And learn him, because when the player comes first, then the players during tough times is going to go a little bit harder. Everyone's going to run through the wall. They play football. They're going to go hit that wall hard, but they're going to hit it a little bit harder when they know that you got their back. When you know that you're going to help them get recruited. When it's decision time, you're going to do the best thing for him. The team's a huge part of it, but when the player comes first and they know that, the team is always better, because then you don't have those things in the locker room that with kids saying, well, it's coaches making me play guard when I'm really a tailback, So I tell kids all the time, you play the position you want to play. We'll work around you. It changes usually when college coaches walk in and say, hey, hey, buddy, you ain't a quarterback, you're a tight end. and I'll sit down with the family and say, listen, you can still play quarterback. I'm not forcing you to do anything. But if you want to play college football, let's listen to some college coaches. So, and again, it's when they get in the car, because this happens a lot nowadays. How was practice? Oh, I hate Coach T. I want to transfer. The first thing, right? The portal. I want to transfer. I want to do those things. But when you sit down with the family and the family knows, even though they don't like your play calls, they don't like this, they want to yell at you in the stands, they want to do. When mom and dad know, you could ask, your son comes first. You might not like my play calling, but you know he comes first. And when they're yelling in the car, dad could look at him and say, well, you picked it. You picked the position. Coach letting you do it your way, So I always just say that the players got to come first, which is number one. Number two is if you don't have discipline, you don't have anything. They got to be self-disciplined. They got to understand what discipline means. Discipline is everything when it comes to sport. That you're not normal. If you guys played the same game that I love and I coach, you played it, you coached it, you guys know it. If you're walking down the street and you hit someone as hard as you do on a football field, you're going to jail. It's a unique thing. You're playing something that only people dream about. There's such a small group of kids that get to play football. At the high school level, college level, and professional level, it's so small that if you don't have discipline, you're not doing anything. And then third, you got to be able to hold yourself accountable. You cannot point the finger. You can't. You can't blame everybody else. You can't say coach don't like me. You can't say, the dude on the street in the street corner 20 years later, man, if coach just let me do this, if coach just hold yourself accountable. Learn how to hold yourself accountable. When it's your fault, I always tell the kids, man, it's my bad. And I practice it. So those three things I practice with them. So, after a football game, I have roles. When we win, players do interviews. They do all the interviews. I usually do a quick one because they make me. But when we lose, players don't. That's coach's fault. And I tell the players, that's my fault. I will take all the blame publicly. We'll get better, but I show them accountability. And they learn that. And by the time they're juniors and seniors, they sit there and, when they're doing their interviews, it ain't perfect. We won, but don't pat us on the back. We're going to learn something tomorrow in film. And just holding themselves accountable. Just make them, which we always say at Hoban, makes them college ready if they're going to play college football. And if they're not going to play college football, it makes them life ready. That, a lot of grown men can't hold themselves accountable. So if you're an 18-year-old young man coming out of Hoban football and you know how to hold yourself accountable, then it just makes them better men. So those are the three things I learned my whole life coaching. That the players got to come first. You got to have discipline and you got to have accountability, and we just form it into those three things, and that's Hoban football.
Yeah, that encompasses a lot of success in life.
Yeah, it's not just football.
Yep. All right, so to kind of wrap things up, we really just touch on one final question to summarize, some thoughts and give you some retrospect. And what we always ask is, just reflecting on your career, life, whatever the case may be. The question is, if you had one more down, where would it be? What would you be doing, and who would you be doing it with? What would that one more down look like?
Oh man, that's a tough one. That really is. That's a great question. I should have been watching all your old stuff, questions, interviews. I would have been ready for that. Man, that's tough. I always joke with my kids, the football players, and say, I got 5 seconds left in me. Don't be that guy I go against. It's only 5 seconds. And I always say what I would do, so I'll answer it this way, because if I have one more down at what I could do right now in part of my life, it ain't playing quarterback at Ursuline. I can't even throw the ball no more. I would be playing tight end at Youngstown and running Dave. running off tackle, blocking down, beating, going against, Jason Taylor from Akron when he was playing at Akron. You know, uh, I most people wouldn't say that unless you're an offensive lineman, even though I'm a tight end. Um, I'd be blocking down, running off tackle, blocking the defensive end. If I had one play left, that's what I would do.
Well, that is said no quarterback ever, right?
Ever. Jim Tressel would be, if he ever sees this, he'll be like, I can't believe he said that. But yeah, blocking down on call. We had one Woody Hayes and all those guys, the great ones, called it Dave. Running off tackle. So we be running Dave.
Getting to speak with you tonight and listen to the trajectory and the pathway that life has led you down. You touched on some of the things that are familiar to the three of us, being Youngstown kids. We know exactly what inspires you because we grew up watching those same individuals. To see that you've been a guy that's been exposed to great teaching, great fundamental learning, great values. It's no shock and it's no surprise that you end up as successful as you are. Your explanation of why you do what you do and how you do it, it hits at what is good about sports. It's not the wins and the losses. It's not the final scoreboard. I'm sure those state titles are things that one day you'll look back and be very proud of. But from what I got out of what you said and how you explained it, the pathway that the people that you influence and that you touch on a daily basis, for them to go on to be great men and have their own great experiences, I think that probably is more fulfilling for you than hoisting the trophy at the end of the season. I'm appreciative that you came on with us tonight to give us your take and your introspective thought of, why you do what you do, who you do it for, and you still represent all of those people from the 216 and the 330. So thank you very much for coming on with us tonight, Coach.
No, it was awesome. I really appreciate it. This is something really cool. It's probably been one of my better interviews I've ever had. You just get a chance to talk and just tell your story and do things like that instead of leading questions and all the other different things that people want you to say. So you guys do a great job, man. This is awesome, and I'm gonna go back and watch a lot of the YouTube stuff just because I probably know a lot of the people you guys have been interviewing and doing. So really appreciate you guys having me. It was awesome.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. And, very appreciative of, obviously in high school, you were older and the guy, so to speak. But just kind of the example that you set and the table and the plate that you set for those that came behind you. So, continue doing that with the people under your care now, and best of luck to you for sure.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen.